Good evening on Channel 1 Ostankiно, the news from the Information Television Agency. The main topic of the day is developments in Chechnya and around it. This morning at 6 o'clock, the time limit expired, which was set by the President of Russia, Boris Yeltsin, for a ceasefire in Chechnya and the disarmament of conflicting groups. In the afternoon, news arrived that the decree of the President, which would declare a state of emergency in Chechnya in the foreseen future, will not be signed. This, an observer of Itartas was told by a high-placed source in the administration of the President. Instead of that, Boris Yeltsin today signed a decree on several measures to strengthen law and order in the Northern Caucasus region. The document, within the aims of stabilizing the situation, provides for a recommendation to be made to the prosecutor of Russia not to hold criminally responsible those individuals who voluntarily, by the 15th of December of this year, relinquished their weapons and not involved in serious crimes against the peaceful population. Today, the press secretary of the President, Vyacheslav Kostykov, stated that under the leadership and control of the President of Russia, a complex of measures has been launched which are intended to dramatically improve the situation in Chechnya and restore constitutional order there, law, and protection of human rights. The President is acting in full compliance with the rights bestowed on him by the Constitution and the people of Russia. It says in the statement by the press secretary of the head of state, the President, with all his heart and soul, understands the concerns of relatives of the citizens of Russia over the fate of Russian troops who have become hostages in Chechnya. On the instructions of the President, Kostykov stated that Boris Yeltsin personally and on his instructions, other responsible organs and individuals are undertaking all necessary measures to save the Russian soldiers. The delegation of the Russian State Duma, headed by the chairman of the Defense Council, Sergei Yushchenkov, which arrived today in Grozny, met with Shobsandin Yusuf, the Minister of Foreign Affairs in the Dudayev government. The delegation is in Chechnya in order to talk about the fate of prisoners taken during the storming of Grozny the 26th of November. Itartas reports that the delegation also held talks with the Vice President of Chechnya, and later Yushchenkov will meet with Dudayev behind closed doors. About the situation in Grozny today, as in the last few days, again, the information received is very contradictory. In the morning, Interfax said, citing the headquarters of the armed forces of Jahar Dudayev, that today, at approximately 1 a.m., the airport of the capital of Chechnya, Grozny, again was subjected to an air attack. According to affirmations of the representative of the headquarters, in the attack, 3 airplanes were involved, the type of which was indiscernible because of darkness. Itartas first refuted this information, but later confirmed it, citing the aid of Jahar Dudayev, stipulating, however, that it was still impossible to verify these reports from objective sources. At 15:35, we received an urgent report from Itartas that bases of the state forces of Chechnya were twice again attacked from the air. There are casualties. 2 women died in a blown-up bus, and according to unconfirmed reports, 2 of the attacked planes were shot down. At 14:15 and 15:10 Moscow time, a correspondent of Itartas reported that several destroyers bombed the Grozny airport, the military airport in the area of the populated point Hankala, and the military base near the village Katayana in the suburban area of the capital. In Grozny proper, Itartas reports the situation remains alarming. In various quarters of the city, additional fortifications are being erected, cannons are being set up, and anti-aircraft artillery. As was learned, 27 Russian military cargo planes and 12 models landed last night in the North Ossetian city Beslan, located 120 kilometers from Grozny. A Dudayev aide asserts that on board the planes there are paratroopers. From Grozny, a representative of the agency Chechen Press reports that in the last days, the majority of residents of the Chechnya capital, the elderly, women and children, have fled to villages fearing combat activities. And the entire male population has remained in Grozny and is preparing for its defense. I quoted Chechnya Press. Meanwhile, in downtown Grozny, a rally continues whose participants have demanded that after each attack on the city to deal individually with each of the imprisoned Russian mercenaries warring on the opposition side. As Interfax reports, today at a press conference, Jahar Dudayev stated that the situation in the Republic is gradually going out of control, and such a moment could come when it will enter a new phase, a phase of a total overall war. Meanwhile, the head of the oppositional interim council of Chechnya categorically spoke out against dialogues between Moscow and official Grozny and insists that Russian forces enter Chechnya. No talks with official Grozny are possible. Today, Umar Avtukhanov told the press and added that the main aim of dialogues for Jahar Dudayev is only to win time. Official authorities of Grozny for now have declined the mediating mission from the president of Ingushetia, Ruslan Aushev, in order to regularize the situation in the republic. This, a correspondent of Vidratas was told by the vice premier of Ingushetia, Boris Agapov. Grozny feels that since Ingushetia is a subject of Russia, its representatives cannot be intermediaries in dialogues with a sovereign, as is indicated in the statement, Grozny of Chechnya with the Russian Federation. Meanwhile, in Grozny in the evening, an emergency session of the Chechnya Ministerial Council began. A correspondent of RIA News was told in the Committee of the State Duma of Defense, from where constant telephone contact is maintained with the Chechnya capital. A member of the committee also stated that the representatives of the Russian press, who were flying together with the State Duma delegation to Grozny, were not permitted on the soil of Chechnya and currently are returning on that same plane to Moscow. We just received a report from Chechnya from our special correspondents. The results of yesterday's air raid on the airport in Grozny are such that in the near future, departure of aircraft from here will be, in fact, impossible. Today, aviation again appeared over the city, and the training airport was attacked. Hence, the air contact of Chechnya with the rest of the world, in essence, has been interrupted. General Dudayev, himself a combat pilot, is left without aviation. The conflicting sides in Chechnya today clarified their losses, held talks on the exchange of prisoners, disarmed unexploded shells and missiles, and evidently were accumulating strength for further resistance. On the square, in front of the presidential palace, a continuing rally was underway. Many observers noted that in the speeches which were pronounced in the square, there was far less criticism against the Russian people. Previously, about the friendship between the mountain people and Russians, we only heard from the village Znamenskaya, where the opposition is based. Today, such talk one can hear with greater frequency, even in Grozny itself. This was also said by a resident of the city who had just disarmed a projectile which had not exploded. Rumors which are spreading like wildfire from Chechnya worry not only residents of adjacent regions, including the Stavropolya Rim. To verify one such rumor, our correspondent Pavel Guskov set out. He visited the prosecutor's office of the Stavropolya Rim area. In the last days, in Stavropolya, it has become known that there were several statements made by official Grozny. First of all, that ostensibly the Stavropolya Air Force, which is even non-existent, is conducting bomb attacks on Grozny, and therefore Grozny reserves itself the right for adequate measures. There's one more rumor that supposedly in the Stavropolya Rim area, mass arrests of Chechen residents are underway. In the last week in Stavropolya, not one Chechen was arrested, and in general, there are no preventative measures in our criminal procedural code provided for. The heads of the Rim departments of the FSK and Internal Affairs also have refuted information about the arrests of Chechens. The Prime Minister of Russia, Viktor Chernomyrdin, today signed instructions to create a temporary informational center within the Russian Committee of the Press. Appointed head of the committee is the chairman of the Rus Committee of the Press, Sergei Gruzunov. What are the aims and objectives of the new information body? Today, by the instructions of the government of the Russian Federation, a temporary informational center was created within the Russian Committee on the Press. It was created in connection with the fact that, as we all know, the situation in the Northern Caucasus has deteriorated, and there is a threat of further destabilization of the social and political situation. And in such circumstances, it's very important to bring to the Russian and world communities exclusive, verified, and reliable and objective information from an official source. We are not presuming to work within a regime of some sort of a filter which will purify the information and issue only what someone feels is necessary. No, we were created for another reason, so that the public would receive as much of this information as possible. In the event a state of emergency is declared in Chechnya, your center will be the only organ of official information. Is that true? Let's not rush with implementing any special measures. Let's wait, because not all the political avenues have been pursued, and possibly not exhausted are the compromise solutions which could be found. The Minister of Defense of Russia today adopted a decision by the 14th of December to deploy to Mozdok in northern Ossetia an insignificant number of forces from the Northern Caucasus military district. These measures, as a correspondent of Viturtas learned, are being adopted in the framework of realizing measures to stabilize the situation in Chechnya set out by the Security Council of Russia. Only the President of Russia, with the decision of the Security Council of Russia, can involve the Russian army in the conflict in Chechnya, and he has the right, pursuant to the current constitution of the Russian Federation, to do this. It's not excluded that if such a decision or such a decree is issued, the army will participate. But again, the army, I'll say directly, if the army even does participate in resolving this conflict, that does not mean that the army will be fighting against the Chechen people. It will aid internal forces in confiscating weapons and technology unlawfully seized by various militarized formations. The statement was made today at midday by Pavel Grachov immediately after the morning session of the Council of Ministers of Defense of the CIS countries, where the question of Chechnya was not only not included in the agenda as expected, but was not even discussed outside the session. The Minister of Defense of Russia feels that this is an internal affair of the Russian Federation and not of the CIS. All questions in the agenda, and there were 7 meetings, were discussed expeditiously and corresponding decisions were made on all. Quite noticeable was the certain shift in Ukraine's position in adopting joint decisions among the CIS countries on all military issues. One more important decision: the commander of the peacekeeping forces in Tajikistan, the Russian general, has received additional authority in involving Russian combat units and units of border troops without having to consult Moscow in combat operations in the event of insurgents on the border between Tajikistan and Afghanistan. At a meeting in the Kremlin with the parliamentary faction, the Women of Russia, Boris Yeltsin, greeted the newly founded today International Alliance of Women's Organizations of the CIS, the agreement on the formation of which was signed in Moscow today by representatives of Russia, Ukraine, Kazakhstan and Belarus, Georgia, Armenia and Azerbaijan, Kyrgyzstan and Tajikistan. At the meeting, also a broad circle of questions was discussed, from the situation in Chechnya to the status of women in society, contractual conscription for the army, healthcare and education problems. The 1st of December is the traditional historical day in the organization of the women's movement. At one time, on this day, an International Federation of Women was formed and the specialized women's magazine. Today, the International Alliance of Women's Organizations is being founded. Members of them will be the former republics of the country. The purpose of the new social union is, as previous, the battle for true equality of women and protection of their rights in the unstable times of today. Despite the national uniquenesses and traditions, unfortunately, the problems in all countries are quite similar, and mutual information and development of common positions in the women's movement are important as never before. Our parliamentary assembly is functioning, and we can approach them with a consolidated point of view. The heads of government are functioning of our former republics, and we can also approach them. But this should not be an approach of an individual country, but we should synchronize our positions with, having observed that such a tendency is pervasive, we could influence it if we have a consolidated point of view. Candidacies for 2 vacant posts in the Constitutional Court of Russia were submitted for examination to the Federative Council by the President of Russia. Viturtas was told in the Higher Chamber of Parliament today. This is the head of the faculty of the Moscow Higher Militia School, Sergei Vitsyn, and the deputy head of the Military Academy of Economics and Finances and Law, Vladimir Strikozov. Pursuant to the Constitution, the candidates submitted by the President should be reviewed by the Federative Council. The Deputy Minister of Finances of Russia, Andrei Vavilov, met with the delegation of the International Monetary Fund today, which yesterday had arrived in Moscow for talks on terms of dispersing to Moscow reserve credit in the amount of around $6 billion. Meanwhile, today in trading at the Moscow Interbank Currency Exchange, the rate of the ruble against the American dollar, compared to the previous session of trading, fell by 15 points and was at the level of 3,249 rubles for 1 American dollar. For the final resolution of the matter of renewing deliveries of Turkmenian gas to Georgia, on Friday at Shevardnadze will leave for Ashgabat. The visit is planned for talks with Sapar Murat Niyazov. Today, the higher legislative organ of Georgia convened for an emergency session in order to discuss the work done by the Republican government in preparing for winter and also to express its attitude toward the recent elections of the president and the adoption of a constitution by the so-called Supreme Soviet of Abkhazia. Regarding the latter issue, Georgian parliamentarians demonstrated a remarkable unanimity. All, without exception, voted for the text of the statement in which it says that the decision of the so-called Supreme Soviet of Abkhazia has no juridical force and has as an aim to disrupt peace talks. Later, the parliamentary opposition demanded that the draft resolution be put to a vote, according to which the effect of all documents signed by the Georgian side after December of 1993 should be suspended. And some, especially the radical deputies, called to annul the mandate of the Russian peacekeeping forces. However, after the speech of Eduard Shevardnadze, who again called out for a peaceful resolution of the conflict, the draft resolution was not adopted. Regarding the examination of causes for the energy crisis which has emerged, today for this there was simply not enough time. The chairman of the Supreme Soviet of the unrecognized Pridnestrovian Moldavian Republic, Grigory Marakutsa, today expressed support for the position of the commander of the 14th Army, the Lieutenant General Alexander Lebed, regarding keeping the Russian army within the region. Previously, Lebed had called the withdrawal of the army unrealistic and spoke out for consolidating the situation by creating a military base or a group of forces. According to the decision of the Ministry of Defense of Russia, the number of Russian peacekeeping forces in Pridnestrovia has been decreased by 4 times, from 2,400 to 600 persons. Such a measure is connected not only with a certain stabilization within the region, but because of the financial difficulties of the Russian military. At the same time, the absence of a political solution for the Pridnestrovian problem, compounded by remaining differences between conflicting sides, has defined the need to continue the peacekeeping operation. In the current reduced format, the Russian contingent of peacekeepers will have to function not so much by numbers but by ability. In that connection, of special importance is that fact that the new shift of peacekeepers who arrived just now in Pridnestrovia consist of soldiers and officers from the same motor artillery regiment which 1 month ago worked out peacekeeping missions during joint Russian-American training at the Totsk polygon. As of today in Armenia, the price on bread jumped drastically, as well as tariffs on electrical power fed to the population. As of today, the residents of Armenia will have to tighten their belts further. 1 kilogram of bread has increased in price by 11 times, 1 kilowatt-hour of electrical power by 6. Incidentally, light is fed to homes on such rations in the last 2 weeks, between 40 to 45 minutes per 24 hours. Therefore, the price jump will probably not have such an impact on the budget of consumers. But bread is serious. As previously, it is issued by Russian tickets, strictly numbered 350 grams per person. And now it costs not 6, but 66 dramas, something around 500 rubles, but believe it, for many in Armenia, this is out of reach. In a special address of the government of the Republic to the people, because of the new jump in prices, it's emphasized that this step is dictated by the need to conduct economic reforms and not forced on them by the International Monetary Fund, for example. The government assures that it will not permit a new decline in the state of living of the people. By decree of the President of the Republic, as of today, a new, higher level of minimum salary in Armenia is to be established. Together with compensation, it will comprise 1,140 dramas, or $2.50. For this money, as statistics buffs calculated, now you can buy as much as 21 kilograms of bread. But as we know, man does not live by bread alone. A new Eurasian community. This prescription to overcome the economic crisis and political instability in the CIS countries is proposed by the Russian Civil Union and parties within that centrist coalition. It was the bloodshed in Chechnya which prompted leaders of the Civilian Union to expedite realization of the idea of integrating the 4 CIS countries, Belarus, Ukraine, Kazakhstan, and Russia. This was stated opening a press conference in Moscow by Arkady Volsky. Our actions are incompetent regarding the Russian region, one of the 89, and the measures are also delayed in essence. This is the first bloodshed on such a large scale within the Russian Federation. And this is what prompted it. The new Eurasian community, in the opinion of the leader of the Civil Union, should begin with restoring economic ties, resolve problems of borders, customs, licenses, excises. This is a contentious issue. Do we need one parliament? Naturally. As a more rational and less contentious option, an economic union. Volsky offers to launch the process through a referendum, naturally in full compliance with the Constitution institutions of the 4 countries. The initiative will be passed to the Congress of Citizens, which is planned in Moscow in the end of December. Publications which have appeared that Russia, together with military technology, sells its secrets and security, future and as well as present, has drawn the attention of journalists to the press conference of the state company Rosweapons. At the press conference, specifically, they spoke about an article in the Rossiyskaya newspaper. It accused the Russian magazine Military Parade advertising military technology designated for sale. As it affirms, secrets of the countries are drifting abroad. Among participants of the press conference were heads of the largest defense science manufacturing complexes, scientists and experts, and they emphasized that in order to preserve the scientific potential and technical potential, this technology is sold, but not the secrets of Russia. About the woeful state of the defense industry, these figures were quoted. Only in the last 2 years, the production of aviation technology in Russia has declined by more than 4-fold, and the production of military electronics has decreased by 6 times. Currently, after the collapse of the USSR, that part of the world market in military technology, which previously belonged to us, is now taken up by American firms. And yet, who decides? Do magazines advertise our secrets or not? Answering that question to the press, participants of the press conference stated that, for example, to define the list of technology which can be sold without detriment to Russia, 1 year of expertise from the Ministry of Defense and the Federal Service of Counterintelligence and other competent organs was necessary. Today in Moscow, in the Central House of Cinematographers, a triumphant evening was held dedicated to the 70th anniversary of the design office in the name Yakovlev. The first flying machine of the design of Alexander Yakovlev, the AV-F-10, ascended into the air the 15th of September 1924. However, the 1st of December is chosen for the festive event, not in vain, because this day is considered to be the beginning of the defeat of the German army near Moscow. An enormous contribution was made by the planes of the Yakovlev's design. During the war, the Yaks were 2/3 of the Soviet destroyer aviation, and during the entire history of the design office, here created were more than 200 types of planes with an overall number of 70,000. This is the largest figure for Russian firms. Within its specifics, for years, the office worked exclusively for the defense sector. The last to be created was the supersonic vertical takeoff jet Yak-141. It is 15 to 20 years ahead of parallel foreign models, but today its financing by the Russian government is severed. By the end of 1992, the defense's orders at plants have virtually stopped, and yet the design office emerged from the difficult financial situation by emphasizing smaller planes. Yak-58s and Yak-112s have high reputations in the world. Incidentally, the planes are built by attracting foreign investments. Today, ties with international companies has not yet been severed. This is the training plane of the new generation Yak-130, the demonstrator. 2 years ago, a bid tender was announced, and the military have not yet made a final choice. They're waiting till the flight tests are completed. The advantages and the shortcomings of this competition are that for the bid and tender, funds are used up, but the advantage is that the best and the strongest win. In the design office, work is underway on planes for local air routes of the new generation. The Yak-242s have included in its program development of Russian civil aviation. Currently, the design of the plane is being completed, and when flight tests begin, will depend on state financing, which today is clearly insufficient. Hundreds of thousands of people in the entire world today took part in functions dedicated to World AIDS Day. According to the World Organization of Healthcare, since the beginning of the AIDS wave, infected by this disease were more than 4 million adults and children, and by the year 2000, their number could reach 10 million. The awareness of danger drew to Paris today political and state activists from tens of countries to the first high-level meeting dedicated to the battle with AIDS. Symbolic was the fact that it was held in a city which is most affected among European capitals by this epidemic, and on the World AIDS Day, which today was attributed great significance in the aspect of preventing the fatal disease. A multitude of social organizations participated most actively in this event. Our main concern is to protect the youth from AIDS, who are the most vulnerable part of the population. State leaders of various countries at the meeting in Paris took on political obligations in the battle with AIDS on a global scale and adopted several concrete measures in that direction. Today, physicians cannot cure a patient with AIDS, but they can extend their lives and improve its quality. This slogan was displayed by the World Organization of Healthcare. Probably, when an AIDS vaccine is developed, the severity of the problem will be reduced, but scientists don't count on this within the next few years, although research is underway in hundreds of labs of the world. Therefore, everything is important which can help an infected person. In Moscow, in the Virusological Institute in the name Ostankino, a new preparation was developed, surpassing parameters of otherwise used materials, but less toxic. Now, statistics. In our country, there are 831 infected, 149 ill, 102 casualties. Compared to the United States, France, and other countries, the situation is relatively stable. However, we are the discoverers of infection within a hospital. Remember the cases in Rostov and Volgograd. After all, as of today, even though it's dramatic, but this is history, the World Organization has a written document and has confirmed in writing that since 1992, such a problem in Russia does not exist. Today, specialists are concerned over the new law on AIDS. In their opinion, much needs to be clarified in it, specifically the point about obligatory testing of all foreign citizens upon entering the country. This evening, the Minister of Foreign Affairs of Russia, Andrei Kozyrev, arrived in Brussels, where tomorrow there will be the session of the Council of the North Atlantic Cooperation and an individual program of cooperation Russia-NATO will be signed. Prior to that, during the day, Andrei Kozyrev was in Paris on a brief one-day visit. Russia and the Western European Union, the examination of questions of interaction of our country with this military political organization of several countries in the west of the continent, was the topic of the concluding day of the work in the Paris of the session of its assembly. Russia, as is evident from the report presented on it, occupies a prominent place in Europe, based on which the Western European Union places hope on broadening cooperation with it. It would be a serious mistake, it was said from the podium of the assembly, to ignore its striving to have fuller integration into European structures. Russia, according to words spoken at the session by the Minister of Foreign Affairs, Andrei Kozyrev, sees in cooperation with the Western European Union a means to strengthen European peace and security of Russia itself. And he also proposed several steps with the aim of enhancing cooperation with concrete content. Andrei Kozyrev read the deputies of the Assembly the decree of the President of Russia that it imposes as of today a moratorium on exports of anti-infantry mines, the creating of borders in international trade on those types of weapons on which Russia and the European Union often spoke out about in the UN. On the Bosnian problem, he said the position of Russia and the Western European Union are quite close, just as its English and French partners. Russia intends to withdraw its peacekeeping forces from Bosnia if the weapons embargo there is lifted. Today in Brussels, the first session of the NATO Council on the level of Ministers of Foreign Affairs, according to the formula 16+1, convened. During its course, the program partnership of Russia with NATO will be adopted. During the day, NATO colleagues held their regular winter session of the NATO Council. In the agenda, execution of the program Partnership for Peace and broadening NATO to the east, as well as the coming conference of the CSCE in Budapest, the problem on non-proliferation of nuclear weapons and the situation in Bosnia. The ministers confirmed the unanimous position of NATO. The Bosnian conflict can be resolved only by political means. The intensity of the combat near Bihać in western Bosnia has decreased somewhat. At the same time, all attempts of the Muslim core to break through the blockade of Bihać from the south were fruitless. Some Bosnian Serbs continue to maintain a sturdy blockade around the city. Some details of the occurrence in the Barents Sea became known last night. The Murmansk fishing trawler Elbrus. The ship was fishing near the coast of the Kola Peninsula. Late last night, the trawler issued a report that water had flooded the steering compartment and its hold. And at 3 o'clock in the morning, the crew was forced to issue an SOS signal. In the morning, it was learned that the Elbrus crew of 8 people removed and delivered safely to shore a Norwegian fishing vessel, and the rescue ship towed the trawler Artyomovsk from the Murmansk trawler fleet. However, to bring it safely to the native port was impossible. The Elbrus, which took in too much water, sank at midday today. Moscow and the Mali Theater said farewell today to Rufina Dmitrievna Nifontova. They say that for her auditions and student days, all students would come from the theater faculty, and she, as an actress, then was 20. And later, she would similarly be flocked, as in the Birds of Our Youth, on the stage of the Mali Theatre. They also say that she loved most of all her theatre and her grandson, Misha, with whom she strolled along boulevards, meeting with other grandmothers and grandfathers, or she would come here to the theatre, where Misha would entertain himself with a bird in the office of the general director or in the makeup and dressing rooms, watching grandmother transform. They say she had an unusual voice and her strength of spirit was unrivaled. In the days when doors would open suddenly, she was an artist of the USSR, never intervened for herself but for those nearby. She never complained nor cried. There were aspects in her personality from her heroic roles. Perhaps she was austere and amazingly proud. They say that sometimes she was mischievous in the good sense of the word, and there is not a person in the theater who could have called her a close friend, and yet there is no one here who didn't love her. They also say that this year is unlucky for actors. From Winter to Winter, Leonov, Borisov, Smoktunovsky, Prudkin, and now Nifantova. I don't know if she liked Tsvetaeva, but for some reason today I don't want to sink into the mire of grief, but to lightly and brightly, like Tsvetaev did, think of her in this empty auditorium, her theater, now with a vacant post. Today in Moscow, the 4th International Musical Festival, the December evenings, opened. The opening of the International Festival of Fine Arts and Music December evenings is always an event. The current 14th one presents to viewers a magnificent exhibit under the name The Artist Reads the Bible. We again can commune with the higher world, as Pavel Florensky wrote upon discovering the spiritual world of Rublev, and unconditionally experience the astoundment before the crucifixion, the brush of Nikolai Gin, a sensation. The public in Russia has almost not seen these panels. It was found in the Arsef Museum in Paris, and through the efforts of Antonova is in exhibit. At the exhibit there are new items for the viewers, although it would seem the masterpieces of world art on a biblical theme are known. They are Rembrandt from the Hermitage, the Mystical Supper, just as the Veneration of the Magi from Georges Bellatour, are seen for the first time. They're from the Louvre. The exhibit presents the role of the Bible in Western European Russian art through 6 centuries, from the 15th to the current. The musical program of the December evenings opened today in the White Auditorium of the State Museum of Fine Arts by the amazing choir, the Moscow Patriarchate, the ancient Russian chant choirmaster Anatoly Grigenko. Ahead are works of Bach, Handel, Haydn, and contemporary musical readings of the books of the Old and New Testaments by Edvard Pat, Vladimir Martynov, a composition from the pages of the Bible produced by Vladimir Vasilyev, and as always, the participation of famous musicians from Russia, Germany, Great Britain, and the CIS countries. And so in Moscow, the New Year celebration has begun for the eyes, for the soul, the mind and heart, the December evenings. These are the most significant events of the day today. In a moment, the sports news with Konstantin Vybornov. With this, I bid you farewell. All the best. Good evening. Simultaneously, there are 2 major sports tournaments occurring in these first winter days in Moscow. Today in the capital, the 31st World Chess Olympiad began, in which the Russians are defending their high title of champions. The first match, the main Russian team is performing without Kasparov and Kramnik, beat Singapore 3.5 by half a point. It's curious that the only tie was recorded in the match of the leaders of Russia, Yevgeny Barev. The surprise of the first day of competitions is the 2-2 tie in the match between Ukrainian and Vietnamese players. Tomorrow, in the Olympijski Sports Complex, the final Davis Cup will begin. A few hours ago, we learned the schedule of the matches. The first on the court will be Alexander Volkov and Stefan Edberg, and later, the duo Kafelnikov-Larsen. In the news program, the captain of the Russian team, Vadim Borisov. What is the condition of the tennis players? I think that each one is in a different state. I think Alexander Volkov is in very good condition because, as you know, he has won the Kremlin Cup, and this inspires a certain hope. Regarding Evgeny Kafelnikov, I think he had a complicated season, but a successful season. As you know, we rejoiced for him. He played marvelously. That's why I hope that they will be in a normal state. In the regular championships of the International Hockey League, 6 matches in the Eastern Zone. Metallurg Magnitogorsk 3-4. The guests recovered after yesterday's loss. Automobilis Tractor 3-4. The same result in the match. Torpedo Usk-Minogorsk Lada. Metallurg Novokuznetsk Salavat Yulive 1-3. Siberian Army Air Force 7-3. Storitsi Crystal. A major victory of the guests 5-0. Good evening. Information from the Oceanic Meteorological Center. The cyclone with a center over Novaya Zemlya will define the weather tomorrow in the northern regions of Russia. On the Kola Peninsula, in the Arkhangelsk district, in the Nenets Autonomous District, and in the Republic of Komi, tomorrow there will be snow blizzards with strong gusty winds and snow drifts on the roads. Temperatures from -5 to 10 on the Kola Peninsula and Arkhangelsk area, -1 to 5 degrees. In Karelia, on Friday it will be cloudy with some light snow, -1 to 3. In the Kaliningrad district, in the Baltic countries, and in Belarus, and in the northwest areas of Russia, tomorrow there will be snow with rain. Temperature in the Baltic countries and Kaliningrad district from 0 to +3. In Belarus, Lithuania, and in the northwest region from -1 to 5 degrees. In the central and central Chernozem area and the Volgovyatsk area, there will be the influence of a warm atmospheric front. Therefore, here it will be cloudy with precipitation with icy roads. Temperatures from -3 to 7 in the Volgovyatsk and central Chernozem area, -7 to 10 degrees. On the lower Volga, in the republics of the Northern Caucasus, in Stavropol and Krasnodar Rim areas, in the zone of an inclement front, it's inclement weather. Temperatures from 0 to -4 on the coast, strong gusty winds. In Moldova and Ukraine, the lower Don and central Volga, there will be an area of high atmospheric pressure, no precipitation, but morning and evening isolated fogs from -1 to -4 degrees. Beyond the Caucasus, cloudy with rain, day temperatures +7 to 12 degrees. In Petersburg, tomorrow, cloudy with isolated snows at night, -5 to 7, during the day around 0. In Moscow and suburbs, cloudy weather with isolated snow, with ice accumulation on the roads. Temperatures at night, -10 to 12, through the Moscow district as low as -15, during the day, -3 to 5 degrees. This is the weather promised for tomorrow by forecasters. The Russian Food Bank and our program wish you a pleasant evening. Goodbye.